Hello and welcome to another YouTube live stream. Ask Me Anything. And my name is Patrik Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com and intensivecareathome.com, and I'm here to answer any of your questions. And I also want to welcome our viewers that watch this show on replay. And if you want me to answer anything, you can also post your questions below this video, and then I'll make another video about it or answer it on another YouTube live stream. So we'll go for about the next 45 to 60 minutes. If you want to join me on the show, you can either type your questions into the chat pad, or you can also get live on the show either through a phone call, or I can send you a link. Or I can send you a link, and then you can join in live on the call here via video, or even if you don't want to go on video, you can just go off camera but talk to me directly here. So there's a number of options here. Now, before I go into today's Ask Me Anything questions, a little bit about myself, what makes me qualified to answer any questions about intensive care and intensive care at home. Well, again, my name is Patrik Hutzel. I'm a critical care nurse by background. I have been working in critical care for over 20 years in 3 different countries. I have been a nurse unit manager for over 5 years in intensive care. I have been consulting and advocating for families in intensive care as part of intensivecarehotline.com for over 10 years. And I'm also the founder and managing director of intensivecarehome.com. With Intensive Care at Home, we provide a genuine alternative to a long-term stay in intensive care, predominantly for long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomies, but also for adults and children that are having a tracheostomy but are not ventilated, may not have a tracheostomy but are ventilated, such as BiPAP, CPAP at home, seizure management, home TPN, and many other medically complex patients at home that otherwise would be in intensive care. So without further ado, let's get to your questions. So again, few options for you. If you're live on the show here to ask me questions, you can type them into your chat pad, You can call me live on the show. Just put up your hand that you want to call me, or I can call you. Or put up your hand and say you want to come on live on the stream here, and I will send you the link. And then you can come live on the show here and ask me on the show. You don't have to go on camera. You can keep the camera off if you want to. It's entirely up to you. But let's start with the questions that have come in over the week. You know, we get so many questions every week. Let's just start with the first question. And once again, if you want me to ask a question here live on the show, type it into the chat pad, or let me know if you want to call in live on the show via phone, or I can send you the link and then you can join me here on the call directly. You let me know what you want to do, or if you just want to listen in, that's fine as well. Let's start with the first question that came in from Nancy. And Nancy says, what is a shot giving a patient prior to donating organs and taking out the breathing tube in the surgery room for family to witness their death, and ending with 5 question marks? Okay, what a great question to ask. So when someone is donating organs, there are 2 ways to donate organs. One is because someone is brain dead, right? That means in most countries and states around the world, they are also legally dead, right? When you look at laws, when someone has been considered brain dead, they are also legally dead. Now, I am not a lawyer, I'm a clinician. There are exceptions to that. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole now, but there are exceptions to, how when someone is quote unquote legally dead, how that can be challenged. There is a very prominent case out there, J.I. Megmar. If you Google J.I. Megmar online, you'll get all about the case, how the family successfully challenged their child. It was a child being brain dead. But I'm not going down that rabbit hole now. I'm just, giving you insights that I've gained over the years. The other option for someone to donate organs is they are not brain dead, but they are often severely brain damaged. And then there is a time window when death needs to be announced, so that the harvesting organs is still within a timely period. That organs are still considered quote unquote fresh and suitable to harvest. So that is when patients are given a quote unquote shot. They might be given some morphine, midazolam, fentanyl to making sure they are approaching end of life without any pain. That is what's being meant by giving a patient a shot. I also argue that the situation you are describing here, Nancy, means the patient has not been brain dead. There are other conditions that have led to the patient donating organs. So I would need more information, but by giving a quote unquote shot, it basically means they were given probably, most likely, some fentanyl, morphine, and or midazolam to make sure they are comfortable when they're approaching end of life. Okay, next question comes from John. And John asks, my diagnosis was B-cell lymphoma. I've had 2 tumors in my lung. Now I have nodules on my right lung and a nodula on my tracheostomy. I am 85. Should I have surgery? Well, John, that's a very difficult question to ask, but and I can see there's a lot of complexities here if you have B-cell lymphoma, I believe, and you have 2 tumors on your lungs, and now you have a nodular on your right lung and a nodular on your trach. Should you have surgery? The question really is, what are your goals of care? What do you want for yourself? Do you want to not give up? And if you don't want to give up, then you should have surgery. The other question here is, with the B-cell lymphoma, do you get chemotherapy? Do you get radiotherapy? Do you get any treatment for that? Right? Do you need regular blood transfusions for it? Right? With the tracheostomy, can you come off the ventilator? There's not enough insights here to see what the right course of action is. But the bottom line is this, John, it really depends on your goals of care. Do you want to try everything that's helping you to get better? Right? Have you discussed this with the surgeon, with your oncologist, potentially with a respiratory physician, pulmonologist? Can you come off the trach? Can you come off the ventilator? What is your support structure? Can you go home, for example? So one solution here might be, try everything that you want to try and then go home with a service like intensive care at home, especially if you're having a trach. Once again, intensive care at home provides a genuine alternative to a long-term stay in intensive care. And if you're having a trach and you're having nodules and tumors on your lungs, there's a high chance you are either in ICU or you end up in ICU, or you are on a step-down ICU or on an HDU floor, confining you to a hospital for long periods of times. And where do you want to spend your time? Do you want to spend your time at home? Do you want to spend your time in a hospital once surgery has been done? what other ongoing treatment do you need for your condition? So for example, with intensive care at home, we're bringing the intensive care into the home by sending critical care nurses into the home, right? By doing so, we're doing a number of things. First of all, we're improving quality of life and quality of end of life for patients and families in intensive care, right? I mean, where do you want to be? Do you want to be confined to an ICU bed, or do you want to be at home in the comfort of your own home, surrounded by your family? What's the better option here, right? That's number one. Number two is, from an ICU perspective, if you're stuck in ICU for long periods of times, they want the bed, right? They have other patients needing the ICU bed, right? And they will have an interest in getting you home, ideally, right? Now, an ICU bed costs around $5,000, $5,000 to $6,000 per bed day within a 24-hour period. So by using intensive care at home, it costs about half of the money. So we're saving 50% of the cost of an ICU bed. It's a win-win situation, right? And you have to think it through here, John. What's best for you? What do you want? What are options after surgery? Also, disclaimer here, with intensive care at home, we are currently operating all around Australia, in all major capital cities, as well as all rural and regional areas. So we are an NDIS approved community nursing service, also TAC in Victoria, iCare New South Wales, NIISQ in Queensland, DVA, Department of Veteran Affairs approved service provider, right? We also receive funding from private health funds, also from public hospitals, as well as from departments of health. So, there are options for you. Now, if you're watching this and you're in the US or in the UK or in Canada, we're not in those countries yet, but you should still reach out to us, because we might be able to help you to take the next steps to go home anyway, because we have so much insights. Okay, John, I hope that answers your question. And I wish you all the best for, the next steps here. It sounds like you've got some challenges, but, a lot of challenges can be overcome over time. Okay, let's look at the next question. And also, before I go on to the next question, just a reminder, if you have any questions for me today, just type them into the chat pad. Or let me know that you want me to send you the link, and then you can come on live on the show, or you can call me live on the show. Let me know if you want to call me, then I'll send you the number. In the meantime, I'll just keep reading out questions that have come in during the week. The next question is from Alicia, who says, my daughter is on a ventilator and the doctors are saying she can't be weaned off. She's also on dialysis. They are suggesting she does hospice care and turn off the ventilator. My daughter wants to live. They are trying to send her to a nursing home without dialysis. Right. Okay, Alicia, that sounds like a very challenging situation. Doctors are saying she can't be weaned off the ventilator. Okay, one thing that you haven't shared with me here, Alicia, is your daughter on a ventilator with a breathing tube or with a tracheostomy? There's a big difference there. So if the doctors are saying she can't be weaned off the ventilator, so what does that mean? Does she have a breathing tube or does she have a tracheostomy? Because if she has a breathing tube, okay, my first question is, what have they tried to wean her off the ventilator? Have they tried everything beyond the shadow of a doubt to get her off the ventilator? Now, you also haven't shared with me her underlying condition. Why is she on a ventilator? Why is she on a ventilator? What's her underlying condition? And so forth. What have they tried to get her off the ventilator? Right? Now, also, if she has a tracheostomy, once again, what have they tried to get her off the ventilator? Right? Have they started mobilizing her? Okay, what are the reasons why they want to suggest hospice? I can see from your email that you are in the US. Now, did you know that many hospitals, when they move patients to hospice and patients pass away, did you know that those patients often don't show up in the mortality rate in the hospital, right? So you have to second guess the motives of hospitals wanting to move patients to hospice and letting them die. Okay, is it a financial decision? Is it too hard for them to continue treating your daughter, right? Have you considered services like intensive care at home for your daughter? But the biggest question here really for me is she on a breathing tube? Is she in an induced coma? Or is she having a tracheostomy? If she has a breathing tube and she failed multiple attempts to wean off the ventilator, and that's why they're telling you they want to move her to hospice, then the next step should be to have a tracheostomy. If she has a tracheostomy and she failed numerous attempts to wean off the ventilator, well, then the question is, can she continue to live with a ventilator and the tracheostomy and go home, for example, with a service like intensive care at home, right? Those are the questions that need to be asked. And again, why is the intensive care team so negative? Did you know that 90% of intensive care patients approximately survive? So why would your daughter be 1 out of 10 not surviving? Why would the odds be against your daughter if the odds, generally speaking, are in a patient's favor in intensive care? Why are they so negative? Right. So with the dialysis, you're saying she's on dialysis and they're suggesting hospice care and turning off the ventilator. I am suggesting here that if they did that, that could be perceived as negligent. Turning off the ventilator, that's killing someone. Especially if she failed weaning off the ventilator. So why would they be negligent? You could sue them for potentially not letting your daughter live. And again, think about options such as intensive care at home. Now, what I can see from your question here, Alicia, is, what I've been saying for over a decade now, that the biggest challenge for families in intensive care simply is that they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to look for. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know their rights, and they don't know how to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care because, you're giving me an incomplete picture here. Many patients in intensive care are on a ventilator and can't come off the ventilator, and no one is suggesting hospice. Turning off the ventilator, treatment is continued, assuming that's what patients and families want. I'm assuming, you have discussed this with your daughter in the past, or that your daughter wants to live. It's part of your email. It says, my daughter wants to live, and trying to send her to a nursing home or to a hospice, that's almost like blackmail. That's two bad situations. It's a no-win. They're giving you only no-win situations. What about continuing treating her? What about continuing trying to wean her off the ventilator? If she has a breathing tube, what about doing a tracheostomy? If she has a tracheostomy but can't wean off the ventilator, what about looking at home care options, again, such as intensive care at home? Right? Why is hospice care the only option? Doesn't make sense. Your daughter wants to live, and they have to respect that wish. Right? You are calling the shots here, assuming you are the power of attorney. You are calling the shots and nobody else. Right? Nobody else but you is calling the shots here. Don't forget that. So don't let the intensive care team make you feel guilty or guilt tripping you. Also, keep in mind that what I said a minute before, there is a documentary out there, I believe on CBN in the US that has exposed that many hospitals move patients to hospice from ICU letting people die, and then they don't show up in their mortality rate, which means it makes the numbers look good, but it doesn't paint the complete picture. You know, they are often doing it for monetary gains, because then they can get in a new patient into ICU and get still funding while patients are in hospice. You know, you have to question the ethics, the morals, and the incentives behind what they're telling you. You have to question everything. You have to question absolutely everything. This is your daughter's life. You know, you haven't shared with me how old your daughter is, but, you know, you have to, this is your daughter's life. Okay, so now let's move on to the next question in a minute. Just quickly, so I have posted the link in here under this video. If you want to come on live on the show, just click on the link and you can come on live on the show here, or you can type your questions into the chat pad. In the meantime, I'll just move on with other questions, but, you know, I welcome you to ask questions here live on the show. And you can also ask questions if you want to come on. If you want to call in live on the show, you can use the numbers that are on the website, intensivecarehotline.com. So if you want to come on live on the show, either with the link that I just posted there, or you can go to intensivecarehotline.com and you can call me now on one of the numbers on the top of the website. So it's up to you. If not, you just listen in, and I'll carry on with the next question. In the meantime, that comes from Ariella. Ariella writes, my mom is in ICU and will have a tracheostomy soon. However, her doctors are extremely impatient and can't wait to send her to a nursing home, or, as you refer to, an LTAC. After watching your videos, I'm now really terrified to send my mom to an LTAC, and I really want to keep her in ICU, but the doctors are saying that her insurance will not pay for my mom to stay in ICU more than she already has been. So we have no other choice, because the hospital will not let my mom stay in ICU. What should I do? Okay, Ariella, the first thing here is, if you believe you have no choice, you are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, so if you think you have no choice, you know, you got to stop thinking that. You always have a choice. Okay, and the first choice that you need to make is controlling your thinking. Stop thinking that you don't have a choice. We have helped, I don't know how many families we've helped over the years to keep them in ICU. So let's break this down, Ariella. My mom is in ICU and will have a tracheostomy soon. Okay, first thing here is, why does she need a tracheostomy soon? Does she need a tracheostomy so ICU can send her to LTAC? Have you asked that question? Or does she need a tracheostomy because ICU has done everything beyond the shadow of a doubt to avoid the tracheostomy and try and wean her off the ventilator and the breathing tube? I don't have the answer for you. However, I can find out for you by either talking to ICU directly, or by looking at medical records, or by setting you up with the right questions. But I need more information. Okay, so you are saying the doctors in ICU are extremely impatient and can't wait to send her to an intensive care, to an LTAC, or, you know. Okay, so why are they impatient? Are they not patient enough to do whatever it takes to avoid the tracheostomy? Or if she does need a tracheostomy, because they have tried everything beyond the shadow of a doubt to avoid the tracheostomy and get her off the ventilator and the breathing tube, are they not patient enough to wean her off the ventilator in ICU, with or without a tracheostomy? Right? Then you're saying, after watching your videos, I'm now really terrified to send my mom to an LTAC. I really want to keep her in ICU. Well, that's quite simple, right? You don't have to send her to LTAC. Stop thinking that you have to, right? So given that you haven't given consent to a tracheostomy yet, or that your mom hasn't had a tracheostomy yet, here is a tip. and I want you to listen very, very carefully now. 99% of times when patients in ICU have a tracheostomy in the US, this is US specific, the ICU will also ask for you to give consent to a PEG tube. PEG tube is a feeding tube in the stomach. At the moment, your mum would most likely have a nasogastric tube or an orogastric tube where they are giving her feeds, right? And 9 times out of 10, they want to do a trach and a PEG at the same time. Again, this is very US specific. Doesn't happen that way in other countries. Other countries, patients have tracheostomies too, but they don't have the PEG tube. They stick with the nasogastric tube. And now listen carefully. Don't give consent to the PEG tube. Don't give consent to the PEG tube. If your mom needs a tracheostomy, so be it, right? Again, I would highly encourage you to reach out to me directly, not just via email, so that I can help you to find out whether your daughter really needs a tracheostomy or whether it's just convenience from the ICU and complacency from the ICU to want to send her to LTAC, right? So what we need to do here is this. Don't give consent to a PEG tube. Just carry on with the nasogastric tube. That's absolutely fine. Patients can have a nasogastric tube for weeks, months on end, if that's what's needed. I hope that's not needed, but under no circumstances should you give consent to a PEG tube, and here is why. An LTAC won't take your mum without a PEG tube. They won't take her. Been there, done that many times, right? Every time we tell clients not to give consent to a PEG tube, an LTAC won't take her. So ICU will be stuck with it. Your mum will be stuck in ICU, and that's a good thing. That's what you want. That's where she should be. ICUs need to take responsibility for getting patients out and weaning them off the ventilator and not handball it off to an LTAC. So here's what you're saying next in your email. But the ICU doctors are saying that her insurance will not pay for my mum to stay in ICU for more than she already has been. Okay. In the US, most Medicare, Medicaid patients can stay in ICU for up to 60 days. Now, I would imagine that your mum is nowhere near close to the 60 days because, if she needs a tracheostomy should be done usually within the first 2 weeks in ICU, assuming that several weaning attempts have been made and assuming that your daughter, that your mum can't be weaned off the ventilator. Once again, that's only, tracheostomy only needs to happen if your daughter has had multiple failed weaning attempts off the ventilator and the breathing tube. Now, you are saying in your email, you have no other choice because the hospital will not let my mum stay in ICU again. Ariella, everything in life is negotiable. Everything, right? Even a stay in ICU. We've negotiated that many, many times for our clients in ICU, many, many times. So no one can force you to give consent to a PEG tube because it's a surgical procedure. No one can force you, right? That's a surgical procedure. No one can force you to have a surgical procedure. No one can force you to give consent to a surgical procedure for your mum. Okay? So by you not giving consent, well, what's the health insurance going to do? That's your free will. You've done your research, right? We've had so many patients stay longer in ICU so that they have time to be weaned off the ventilator in ICU and not go to an LTAC, where the level of care is so low, that patients either die or bounce back to ICU in no time. Or another scenario that's then often happening is, when patient, and ICUs are not telling you that, when patients go to LTAC, they often get a 30-day window, right, to be weaned off the ventilator. And most LTACs can't wean people off the ventilator, even if they have months, on end. So then they get a 30-day window. If they can't be weaned off the ventilator, then they get sent to a nursing home or to a subacute facility. Okay. So picture this. Your mom is in ICU, has a care team around her that's just getting to know her. Then she's going to LTAC, has another care team around her, that needs to get to know her. She has 30 days. Then she gets sent to a nursing home if she doesn't improve. But what probably happens in the meantime is, most patients bounce back to ICU. You're already saying in your email that ICU wants to get her out as quickly as possible, right? This is not clinically safe. You should get a patient out when they're ready, right? Doesn't sound to me like your daughter is ready. Now, again, picture this. Your mom goes to LTAC and then deteriorates. Most patients deteriorate in LTAC pretty quickly because, they don't work with ICU nurses. They don't have experience in critical care. And they mess it up big time. And then they bounce back into ICU. Now, here comes the spoiler alert. When patients bounce back from LTAC to ICU, the discharging ICU may no longer have a bed. And then she's going to another ICU, right? So picture this, your mom is in ICU, gets a trach, gets a PEC, goes to LTAC for a few days, deteriorates, bounces back to another ICU. She's critically ill, at the most vulnerable she's ever been probably, and then she's bouncing around from place to place within a few days. That is madness. That is sheer madness, right? And you know that it's sheer madness. Okay, so I hope that clarifies what you should be doing next. And here's another tip. If the insurance has not contacted you directly, do you just believe what the hospital is telling you? Don't you think that insurance would contact you if they no longer paid? You have to question everything, right? So first off, to summarize here, Ariella, first off, you are in control. Stop thinking that you don't have a choice. Don't give consent to a PEC, that's first off. Make sure they have tried everything beyond the shadow of a doubt to wean your daughter off the ventilator. And I can verify that for you by just, talking to them or setting you up with more questions, but I would need to know more. But I can find that out very quickly. Okay. And only then will we see what the next steps are. Everything in life is negotiable. Don't give consent to a PEC. If you haven't heard from the health insurance, they're just trying to scare you. Okay. We have had so many patients, so many clients that we advocated for staying in ICU for much longer than the hospital wanted, with good outcomes, and it's never been an insurance issue. Never. Okay, let's move on to the next question. And in the meantime, for people watching this live, send me your questions here, type them into the chat pad, or use the StreamYard link that I posted in there, and then you can come on live on the show. Or call us on one of the numbers just at intensivecarehotline.com, and I will answer the phone and I will get your question over the phone here. In the meantime, let's move on to the next question from Julian. Not Julian, sorry, Josie. Okay, question from Josie. A couple of days ago, hi Patrik, a couple of days ago my father had an ischemic stroke that turned into a hemorrhagic stroke. For the first day or two, he was aware a little, though he couldn't speak or understand. Since I have been able to visit him, he has been asleep the whole time, unable to open his eyes or respond. He had some seizures that required him to be sedated and put on a ventilator, which wasn't originally there. He has a feeding tube in the nose as well. He's in ICU, and he has been since the day of the stroke. The other day, before the sedation, he did open his eyes once or twice. Apparently, when my stepmom visited him, he was able to mumble to her little "I love you." He was able to smile, but I haven't seen a thing of that in the last 3 days. He has a clot in his heart, apparently as well. That may have been the cause of the stroke in the first place, since it wasn't pumping blood to the brain properly. I'm his 18-year-old daughter. I am so worried. Worried to my core. Because I'm so young and I cannot lose my dad, the nurse said something that deeply concerned me, that there's a greater possibility that he won't wake up properly than not. But according to my stepmom, they're supposed to give bad news before good news. Since he was awake before, please can you tell me what you think will happen to him? From Josie. Thank you, Josie, for your detailed question. So again, let's break this down step by step. So with an ischemic stroke, basically what an ischemic stroke means is there's no oxygen perfusion to the brain. If there's no oxygen perfusion to the brain, it can be caused by a clot, by a blood clot, or it can be caused simply by low blood pressure, by cardiac arrest, by low blood and oxygen perfusion to the brain, whatever the cause may be. But it sounds to me like the cause may have been a thrombus, because you're talking about a thrombus in his heart that may have triggered, a thrombus going to the brain. So then they might have used some thrombolysis to break down the blood clot, right, to reestablish blood flow to the brain. Now, by doing that, they may have caused a hemorrhagic stroke. A hemorrhagic stroke basically means a brain bleed. Okay, so it looks to me like ischemic stroke was treated with thrombolysis, breaking down the blood clot, and then that actually caused a brain bleed. That's what it looks like to me with what you've shared here, Josie. Now, the brain bleed or the hemorrhagic or the ischemic stroke or the combination of both triggered him to have seizures. And it also triggered him to open his eyes or respond. Now, what happened in the meantime, though, is that they might have put him in an induced coma. Now, he also may have had surgery for the brain bleed. You haven't shared that here. But you're saying he's unable to open his eyes or respond. He had some seizures that required him to be sedated and put on a ventilator, which wasn't there originally. Now, the other day before the sedation, he did open his eyes once or twice. Okay. So apparently when my stepmom visited him, he was able to mumble to her a little, "I love you." He was able to smile, but I haven't seen a thing of that in the last 3 days. He has a clot in his heart apparently as well. That may have been the cause of the stroke in the first place, since it wasn't pumping blood to the brain properly. Now, you also mentioned that he had some seizures. Okay, and if he has seizures, he would also have some anti-seizure medication, most likely Keppra or phenytoin. Sometimes it's a combination of both. Now, if that is the case, right, he would be deeply sedated with, whatever else he's getting. He's probably getting morphine or fentanyl and or midazolam or propofol. If he's getting midazolam, that might stop him from waking up. If he's getting propofol, that can be switched off and he may wake up quicker. But the question really here is, what else have they done? Have they done a CT scan or an MRI scan of the brain? Have they done an EEG of the brain? Have they had specialist input from a neurologist? Has he been evaluated by a neurosurgeon to see whether he needs surgery because of the brain bleed? Right? Also, what are the neurologists and the neurosurgeons saying about the prognosis? Right? Do they think that if they stop the anti-seizure medications that he will have seizures again? Right? You can see there are a number of questions that need to be answered. Right? I bet that your dad would have had a CT or an MRI scan of the brain. Right? So then you are also saying, the nurse said something that deeply concerned me, that there's a greater possibility that he won't wake up properly than not. Well, again, where's the evidence for that? What does the MRI scan or the CT scan of the brain show? Right? Is he not waking up because he's simply too sedated? Because what they need to do is they need to stop sedation at some point and see whether he can wake up or he can't wake up. Now, what I gather from your email is he is still on sedation, right? So he may not wake up as long as he's on sedation. Why don't they stop the sedation? Because at some point you need to wake up. The sooner the better. The longer you wait, the higher the chances are, he's getting deconditioned, he's getting other complications. You need to wake up a patient as quickly as possible, assuming he doesn't have any seizures. Okay. Then you're saying, according to my stepmom, they're supposed to give bad news before good news. Yes, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. Here is what you need to understand, Josie. By giving you bad news, they are trying to create a narrative of negativity and doom and gloom. And they're doing that so that they can also stay in control of the narrative. So let's just say your dad won't wake up. And I'll come to your question in a minute, whether he will or he won't. But let's just look at it from their perspective. Okay, let's just say your dad won't wake up. Then it's very easy for them to tell you, well, I told you so, that he won't wake up. And then it's easy for them to go down the track of, well, because I told you so that he won't wake up, that means we should just move him to palliative care, move him to a hospice, and have him end of life and get him end of life care. Do you want that for your dad? It doesn't sound to me like you do, because you're saying you don't want to lose your dad, and rightly so. So you have to put things in perspective here of them being negative. Here's another thing. Let's just say they would tell you, hey, Josie, your dad will be in ICU for 2 weeks and for 3 weeks. We are doing X, Y, and Z. We're giving him this treatment and that treatment. And then he'll be discharged to a hospital ward, and then, he'll go on to rehabilitation and so forth. And let's just say that's what they promise you, and then it won't happen. You could potentially sue them for misinformation. So by them giving you the bad news, they're managing their downside, because they're not really giving you any hope, and they're not really making any promises to you. Okay. Now, to come back to your question, can you tell me what you think will happen to him and will he wake up? Well, first things first. Have they stopped sedation? You'll only find out if he wakes up once they stop sedation completely. Now, here is what might happen if they stop sedation. He may wake up, but he may be confused, he may be agitated, he may be combative, right? And you don't know what that looks like. That's one option. Second option is he may not wake up, right? And he may need a lot of time to wake up, right? And then you got to give him the time. Third option is he may not wake up when they stop sedation, but all of a sudden he's starting to have seizures, right? And then they have to reevaluate where are the seizures coming from. How do they treat the seizures? Here is what's next. You are also saying this happened a couple of days ago. If he doesn't wake up, right, he will most likely need a tracheostomy. Okay. And that will give him time to wake up, because a breathing tube can only stay in for so long. It can cause a lot of damage, and the breathing tube can only stay in so long, Miguel, I see your message here. I'll come to that in a minute. Let me just finish Josie's message and then I'll come to your question, Miguel. So, and that's the question here, Josie. I hope that helps you, to steer this territory of a stroke in ICU. I also want to encourage you. I did an interview with Bill Gaziamis a few weeks ago, a stroke survivor. You can find it on my channel or on my podcast section at intensivecarehotline.com. It's a very inspiring interview from a stroke survivor, right? If all doesn't go as planned here, Josie, and he needs a tracheostomy and he doesn't wake up, once again, have a look at intensivecareathome.com for other options to get your dad home if he doesn't improve in ICU and if he doesn't wake up as quickly as possible. Okay, Miguel, thanks for your question here. In the hospital, my dad's breaths are fine with the tube. They move him back to the home and his whole head moves because of the breathing. Is there a possibility the settings are wrong at the home? Miguel, can you tell me a little bit more? Here is what I would like to know about your dad's breaths. Few questions here before I can answer your question. A, does your dad have a tracheostomy? Okay. If he has a tracheostomy, it sounds to me like he's attached to a ventilator. He has a tracheostomy. I don't know how to spell it. He has a tracheostomy, okay. And do you know what ventilator settings he's on? Right. I need to know ventilator settings. And here is the next question, Miguel. You might have heard me talk about intensive care at home. If your dad is at home on a ventilator with a tracheostomy, he really needs ICU nurses 24 hours a day. You know, everything else, your dad is at risk of dying. So he is on a ventilator. Do you know what ventilator settings he's on? Would also be important to know what size tracheostomy he has. Would also be important to know what led him to this condition. And, you know, would be good to have as much information as possible. Okay, so Miguel, while I'm waiting, so what I would like to know next, what are the ventilator settings? You know, how long has he been at home? And what are his underlying conditions? If you could share that with me, that would be really great. Because then I can dive deeper. He's at retire. Oh, I see. He's not at home. He's at a retirement home. I see. Okay. Well, that sounds dangerous to me, because at a retirement home, there aren't any ICU nurses. You don't have the settings on, yeah. So, Miguel, I would need the settings. The settings, I'll type this here, what I need from you, so you've got it in writing. I need the ventilator settings, his medical history, at least the brief one, medical history, and tracheostomy size. That's what I would need as next steps. I just posted it here. Right. The more information, the better. And if you don't get it to me on this call, you know, you can email it to me at support@intensivecarehotline.com. But if you can get it to me now, then I can continue, you know, continue answering your question here. Okay. In the meantime, but it also sounds to me, Miguel, like, you know, I'm not surprised that you can see that there's something wrong, right? And you can also see that they don't know what to do, right? Yes, that would be great. If you can email it to, I'll send it to you here, support. If you can email it at support@intensivecarehotline.com. I'll just type it into here. If you can email it there, that would be great. But, you know, you can already see that even without that, you can see that they don't know what they're doing. and this is the issue that I'm having, with people leaving ICU on ventilators. There are evidence-based guidelines around leaving ICU on a ventilator with a tracheostomy, and clearly it can only be done with 24 hours intensive care nurses, right? When you look at our sister site, intensivecareathome.com, there is a section, the mechanical home ventilation guidelines, and there, the mechanical home ventilation guidelines, you will see that when patients go home on ventilation with tracheostomy, they need to have 24-hour intensive care nurses, right? And those intensive care nurses need to have a minimum experience of 2 years in ICU or in an emergency department or emergency room, right? Well, Miguel, you're saying I'm with him every day. I notice the changes, and to them they say it's normal. It's not normal. You're already picking up on that, right? That's what I said before. I assume you are in the US, Miguel. That's what I was saying before. As soon as a patient leaves ICU on a ventilator, goes to LTAC, goes to a nursing home, whatever the case may be, it's dangerous, and you know it, and you can already see it, right? So, and that's what we do with intensive care at home here in Australia. We send ventilated tracheostomy patients home with critical care nurses 24 hours a day, so that those issues don't come up in the first place, assuming someone is ventilator dependent for long periods of time. Yes, you're in Chicago. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, that's what, it's really dangerous what your dad is going through here. I can see that already. Okay. Let's get to let's wrap this up in a minute. I do have the next question is quite long, and I do need to wrap this up in a minute. Let's just quickly see whether I've got a question that's a bit shorter. They're all pretty long. Just give me a second. Question from Baroni. Baroni says, I have a lot of fear. My sister had an emergency brain tumor operation. She was sedated and on a ventilator for 1 week. Now the ventilator is off and she's breathing by herself, but she doesn't open her eyes yet. That the doctors why can't the doctors remove the pipe from her throat? Well, that's actually a great question, and you are right in having some fear here. Okay, if they remove the breathing tube and she's not waking up, they must have done a swallowing assessment. Normally, when a patient doesn't wake up and is on a ventilator and they can't protect their own airway, then a tracheostomy is often the next step. However, if she's not opening her eyes, that is definitely a concern, right? However, if they remove the breathing tube, it means that she must be able to protect her airway, i.e., that she must have shown signs that she can swallow, and she must have shown signs that she can cough and gag, because that means she can protect her own airway. Okay, so from that perspective, what you should be concerned about is, is she potentially ending up with an aspiration pneumonia because she can't swallow, she can't cough, is saliva trickling down her lungs? Yes, that would absolutely be a concern, right? But if she's not waking up and they remove the breathing tube, she must be awake to a certain degree where she can protect her airway. So the questions that you should be asking Baroni is, ask them, is she coughing, is she gagging, and is she swallowing? And obviously she must be breathing, otherwise they wouldn't have removed the breathing tube. So those are your questions to ask, as a next step. It's a positive sign that they were able to remove the breathing tube. Now, let's just say, God forbid, she's not coughing, she's not gagging, they might have to consider a tracheostomy. They might have to consider that. And she may not necessarily need a ventilator, but she may need a tracheostomy to protect her airway, so that she's not aspirating. Okay, so I want to wrap this up for today. I do these YouTube lives every week usually at 10:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning, Sydney, Melbourne time. That's currently 7:30 p.m. Eastern time in the US, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time in the US. It's half an hour past midnight in the UK when I do these YouTube lives at the moment. The times will slightly change in the US and the UK once daylight saving finishes in those countries. It'll stay the same here in Australia. It's always at 10:30 a.m. Sunday morning, Sydney, Melbourne time. Now, if you like my videos, I would encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, give the video a like, give it a thumbs up, comment below what you want to see next, share the video with your friends and families, and tell everyone about those YouTube lives so they can come onto the show and have their questions answered. Now, we also have a membership for families of critically ill patients in intensive care, where you have access to me and my team 24 hours a day in the membership area and via email. And we answer all questions intensive care related. And if you want to become a member of our membership for families of critically ill patients in intensive care, go to intensivecarehotline.com, click on the membership button, or go to intensivecaresupport.org directly. I also offer one-on-one consulting for families in intensive care over the phone, via Skype, via Zoom, via WhatsApp, whichever medium works best for you. And I talk to you directly, I talk to your families directly, I talk to doctors and nurses directly, asking all the questions that are necessary and that you haven't even considered asking. Once I do speak to doctors and nurses directly, the dynamics usually change in your favors very quickly, because the intensive care team realizes you have someone on your team that speaks the intensive care language inside out just as much as they do, and they can no longer take you for granted, and you no longer need to believe everything they're telling you, right? And obviously the goal for you as families in intensive care is to make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence very fast. And that's what we do here at intensivecarehotline.com, to making sure you get that very fast. I also represent you in family meetings with doctors, nurses, intensive care teams. Once again, I would not go into any meetings with them if I was you without a written agenda and without having clinical representation with you, such as like myself, so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence fast. We also offer medical record reviews in real time so that you can, again, make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence. We also offer medical record reviews after intensive care if you have unanswered questions, if you need closure, or if you are simply suspecting medical negligence. Also, if you need intensive care at home, please go to intensivecareathome.com. That's it for today. Let's wrap this up. Again, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click the like button, and I hope I'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your support. Take care for now. This is Patrik Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com and intensivecareathome.com, and I will talk to you in a few days. Take care for now.